Now, in the aftermath of 9/11, a number of Muslim men living legally in the UK were arrested, suspected of being involved in terrorism. Some were held under house arrest, others were taken to Guantanamo. None of them has been found guilty, but only one, known as Mr. G, has so far been exonerated and released, and that happened last Tuesday, 12 years after his arrest. His wife's story is told in a new book by the former Guardian journalist Victoria Brittain. It's called Shadow Lives, The Forgotten Women of the War on Terror. I'll speak to Victoria in a moment, but early this morning I talked to Mr. G's wife, Josephine. What happened the day her husband was arrested in 2001?
The Home Office came with the police. They came with a lot of police people and squad people, and they said to my husband to come with him. So I didn't understand. My husband just asked me to pack some of his clothes, and I asked him where he's going. He said he doesn't know. So they just took him, and I stayed with my daughter, and they raided the house. They searched everything in the house.
And how did you find out what had happened to him?
In the evening, one of the solicitors called on my mobile. She spoke with one of my friends, and she translated to me that my husband was arrested because he was on suspicion of being a terror suspect.
Why did they think he was a terrorist? What evidence did they have?
That was one of the main problems, because the evidence until now, after 12 years, we don't know, because we are not allowed to see the evidence they have against my husband, or even the solicitor as well. So we can't see which evidence they have against him. So that's why it was very difficult. And he didn't have any trial. So he was just in prison like this indefinitely.
Now, I know you didn't see him for some months after his initial arrest. When you did see him, what state was he in?
The first stage was everyone was just shocked, and we didn't know exactly the consequence of being in prison without trial indefinitely. It was the first time that they do this kind of legislation in Britain. So when we understood that he could stay in prison like this forever, this was very terrible and very difficult.
Now, he was in prison for about 4 years and then was released under house arrest, and he lived at home under a control order. What sort of restrictions applied to him when he was at home?
When he was in house arrest for 9 months, we was not allowed to have any visitor at all. Even family, doctor, was not allowed to have any landline number or mobile, internet, and even, for example, if something happened in school, we were not able to know if something happened because we didn't have any landline. I had my mobile, but I can just use it outside, for example, in the garden like this, but at home it had to be switched off. And my husband was at home 24 hours, and he had a tag on his feet. These 9 months were very terrible. And my husband felt very upset and hopeless, because when he was in prison, at least he could speak with people for 1 hour. But now, he was even not allowed to go in a back garden. If he waved to someone or if he spoke with someone, he would break his condition and go back to prison.
Now, he was arrested again, I know, after 7/7.
Yeah.
What effect did all this have on his mental health? I know he's tried to commit suicide.
But this time he was on deportation. And this time it was just too much for him, and he attempted to suicide because his state was very, very bad.
Now, after 12 years, he was exonerated and freed last week.
Yeah.
How did the family celebrate?
They came and they took off his tag after all this time. I don't know, we just couldn't believe it. We were happy and shocked at the same time, and we just went to a restaurant and we stayed outside very late, past 11 o'clock. And last week, I don't know if you remember, it was freezing cold. But still, just to say that now we can go and go where we want past his curfew time. So we just stay outside, and it was very nice. Yeah.
And Josephine, how is he physically now?
Because my husband is disabled. Before he could walk with sticks and like this, but now we had to have a wheelchair because when he was in prison with isolation 23 hours, and he lost a lot of weight, so he couldn't walk, and this affected his physical state. So this left him very damaged.
I was talking to Josephine, the wife of Mr. G, and the experiences of another dozen or so women are told in Victoria Brittain's book. Victoria, what inspired you about these women's stories?
Well, I was inspired on the one hand by how amazingly resilient the women were, and particularly Josephine, with all that she suffered, the way she was able to bring joy into her kids' lives and her husband's life, I found completely inspiring. And on the other hand, I was every day outraged by the fact that nobody cared in Britain, that people were living in these extraordinarily difficult and seemingly unfair situations with no due process.
But how do you balance your pity or your admiration for the women alongside the need to be robust in dealing with terrorism? I mean, 3 men were arrested last week.
Well, I actually find it very easy to balance the two. And when terrorists are arrested, as they were last week, or the people who did after 7/7, the next attempted one, they got life sentences. And I think on the whole, when the police do their job and people come to court and they are sentenced to large prison sentences, that's excellent for our society. What's not excellent is people, particularly refugee foreigners, which is most of the small group I'm writing about, who, when they come to court, the evidence against them is in secret, and they're not actually ever charged with anything. This is what's so extraordinary about...
But why would they have been arrested if there was no evidence against them, if they were not suspects?
Well, think back 10 years. Remember how it was after 9/11. As Tony Blair said, the gloves are off, the rules have changed. And there was a vast fishing expedition against Muslims all over the world. And Britain and America, France, everybody was gathered together in trying to find the links between the people that did 9/11. And very, very grave mistakes were made, as we know in Guantanamo Bay. The vast majority of people who were picked up and spent time in Guantanamo Bay, again with no charges, were found to be completely innocent.
Now, Josephine's husband, as we heard, has just been released. What about the others?
Well, there are quite a number of families who are still under the kind of conditions that she described. And I think that the heroism of the women, and in many cases actually the heroism of the men, because some of the women have really cracked under this pressure, unsurprisingly. And I have been in houses, very, very touching men under these conditions are still able to give real loving care to their tiny kids and to the wives. So I've met some very heroic and wonderful, warm people along the way.
Now, one of the women has a husband who is still in Guantanamo. What's happened to her?
Well, the case of Shaka Armour is one of the great, great scandals in Britain. Poor Zanira, his wife and children, live here in London. Shaka was cleared 5 years ago. He's been cleared several times. Home secretaries, foreign secretaries, even Prime Minister David Cameron have told us that they've asked for his release. I've got to the point where I don't believe that. How can it be that a British resident who is accused of absolutely nothing can be still in Guantanamo Bay after all these years? His children have grown up virtually without him. His youngest child has never seen him. His wife has suffered very, very greatly, and all her family.
How have these women kept the families together and kept money coming in and kept feeding their families when they've been under so much stress?
Well, I think the real clue is their faith. All these women are very devout. They all have Allah as a presence constantly in the room, constantly referred to. And the fact that they're living on benefit, and in some cases with a little help from other family members, but are in very grave difficulties, they manage it because of their faith.
And how much do other members of their faith in their communities help them?
Well, at the beginning, it was very, very difficult because in the climate of post 9/11, I think the Muslim community in all its different forms in this country was so traumatized that nobody wanted to have anything to do with people who had a terrorist label around them. As the years have gone by, and it's become more and more evident that, as I said, in Guantanamo Bay, most of them had never done anything. And it's been clear that our security services have made very, very grave errors. And there have been all the cases like Benjamin Mohammed. There's been the recent case of the Libyans who are now suing the security services. People have become more willing to be seen to be helping.
What are you hoping to achieve by writing this book?
Well, first of all, cheer the women up tremendously because they feel that their stories, in the way they want them told, are out there. Secondly, encourage more people to question what kind of society have we got where we think it's all right for somebody to be in Guantanamo Bay after all these years. We wrote with Zanira and her daughter and me and Vanessa Redgrave, Helena Kennedy, other people, we wrote to Sherry Blair, Prime Minister's wife, human rights lawyer, no answer. We wrote to Sarah Brown, very nice woman by all accounts, no answer. I just think that if somebody like that put themselves in the position of knowing this stuff, we could bring a change.
Victoria Brittain, thank you very much for being with us. And I must say, we did ask the Home Office to comment, and they said they don't comment on matters of national security. Thank you.